Bullies attack a black girl to Coma. Then her mother destroys the entire school before we start today's story. Comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what's next. They thought that beating a black girl into a coma, right in the middle of a high school hallway, would silence her forever. But those bullies had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't know that her mother wasn't just another parent. She was a storm waiting to be unleashed. And when that storm finally hit, it would burn their entire world to the ground. In a place where money, power, and privilege usually bought silence, this time every lie, every cover-up, only added more fuel to her fire. And when she struck back, not the principal, not the school board, not even the bullies would be safe. The bell rang at Briarwood High, echoing through the long gray hallways. The sound of lockers slamming and voices shouting filled the air. Students rushed to class, their shoes squeaking on the shiny silver tiles of Block A. In the middle of the crowd walked Liana Reyes. Her hands clutched her backpack tightly to her chest. Her head was down, and she walked fast, as if the air itself was too heavy to breathe. She had only been here for 2 weeks. In that short time, she had learned one thing. Her dark skin made her a target. Every time she passed a group of students, their eyes followed her, whispering things she pretended not to hear. But today felt different. The hallway was too quiet. The laughter was too forced. Her stomach twisted with fear. Then came the voice that made her freeze. "Hey, new kid." It was loud, rough, and full of mockery. Brandon Kellen stepped out from the crowd, a smirk on his face. His blue and yellow baseball jacket caught the fluorescent light. In his hand was a long wooden bat. Behind him stood his loyal group, Reed, Mason Ward, and Tessa Marlowe, the so-called underground power of the school. Everyone knew them. Everyone feared them. And no teacher dared to stand against them. Brandon's father, after all, owned the Kellen Foundation, the school's biggest donor. If you crossed Kellen, your career was over. Brandon stopped right in front of Liana, blocking her path. "What's in the bag?" he said, his grin sharp. "Carrying bricks or something? Trying to fight?" He yanked her bag out of her arms and threw it to the floor. Books spilled out across the hallway. The students stopped walking. Some laughed. Others took out their phones. A circle began to form. Liana bent down, trying to gather her books quickly, but Brandon kicked one across the floor, his eyes locked on hers. "You think you can just walk through my hallway?" he sneered. "I make the rules here." The crowd murmured. "Poor girl," someone whispered. But no one stepped forward. No one ever did. From the corner of her eye, Liana saw Ms. Alvarez, the math teacher, walking toward them. Relief rushed through her, until Ms. Alvarez stopped a few feet away and froze. The teacher's face went pale. She clutched her folder tightly. Her eyes darted between Brandon and Liana. Then she turned away, pretending not to see. The betrayal hit Liana harder than the laughter. Brandon tapped the bat against the locker doors. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The sound echoed through the hallway like a countdown. "You want to pass?" he said. "Then pay the toll." "What toll?" Liana whispered, her voice trembling. He lifted the bat slightly. "This." The crowd roared. Tessa raised her phone and shouted, "Go live! Let's record this." Dozens of phones lifted into the air. Bright screens lit the hallway. Comments started popping up instantly. "Hit her. This'll go viral. Poor thing's done for." Mason started pounding the lockers with his stick, laughing loudly. Each sound made Liana flinch. Her chest tightened. Her breathing grew shallow. She tried to stand, but her shoe slipped on a notebook, and she fell hard. Her shoulder slammed against the cold metal locker. Pain shot through her arm. Brandon stepped forward, his face twisted with pride. He raised the bat high. Liana stared at the logo burned into the wood, Kellen Foundation. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol. The whole system of power that protected him. Ms. Alvarez took a shaky step forward, her lips parting as if to stop him, but then she stopped. Her eyes filled with fear. She looked away again. Brandon grinned. Then the bat came down. The sound cut through the hallway like a scream. One hit. One fall. And silence. Phones recorded everything. Comments exploded across screens. But for Liana, the world went dark. The night was filled with sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against the white walls of St. Aora Hospital as the ambulance screeched to a stop. 2 medics rushed a stretcher through the emergency doors. On it lay Liana, still and pale. Her temple was bruised deep purple, her lips trembling slightly. Traumatic brain injury, a nurse shouted. Unconscious for 7 minutes. Dr. Nquill ran over, his coat stained with old coffee. Oxygen, now. Check her pupils. Nurses surrounded the girl, attaching wires and tubes. The monitor beeped weakly. Pupils dilated, slow reaction, said Dr. Ryo. Dr. Nquill frowned. Severe concussion. Get her to CT immediately. If there's bleeding, we operate. They rushed her down the hall. The wheels of the stretcher squeaked across the tile. The doors slammed shut behind them. The sound of the heart monitor faded until only silence remained. Minutes later, Nurse Clara walked over to Dr. Adrian Cross, who was typing the report. Her voice was low. Doctor, someone called. They said to change the report. Not beaten. Just say she fell. Dr. Adrian Cross froze. Who called? They didn't give a name, but they said they already spoke to hospital management. He sighed deeply. Then, without another word, he typed on the screen. Concussion due to fall. 1 sentence. That was all it took to erase the truth. Clara's hands trembled. Doctor, what if her family asks? He didn't look up. Then we'll have to decide, he said quietly. Do we stand with the truth, or hide in the dark? The green light from the monitor blinked across their tense faces. Then the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hall. The ICU door opened. A tall woman entered, her back straight, her steps steady. Her eyes were red from crying, but filled with a cold, controlled fire. She walked straight to the bed and took her daughter's hand. Celine Ward had arrived. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, staring at the tubes and the bruises, feeling every heartbeat as if it were her own. The war had begun. Hours passed. Midnight filled the ICU with silence. Celine stood by the window, staring at her daughter through the glass. Machines beeped steadily beside Liana's still body. Celine had been through worse, or so she once thought. She had been a soldier. She had faced real wars. She had seen men fall beside her, and had wiped blood and sand from her face. But none of it compared to this, to watching her child fight for her life, surrounded by cold machines. Dr. Adrian Cross came out, his eyes tired. Mrs. Ward, he said gently, her condition is serious. There's no bleeding, but she's still in a coma. We can't predict anything yet. Celine nodded silently, then pointed to the file in his hand. Let me see it. He hesitated. Her stare was sharp, unbreakable. Finally, he handed it over. Celine flipped through the pages. Then her eyes stopped. Cause of injury. Fall. Her voice turned to ice. Who wrote this? Dr. Adrian Cross swallowed. It was already entered before my shift. I didn't touch it. I know it's not true, but orders came from above. Celine gripped the folder so tightly it crumpled in her hands. She turned and punched the vending machine beside her. The loud clang echoed through the hall. A soda can dropped to the floor and rolled away. I don't believe in coincidences, she said quietly. Just then, a man in a gray suit entered. His badge read, Internal Affairs, St. Ella Hospital. He smiled politely. Mrs. Ward, I understand your pain. But sometimes, records have to be written in a way that makes everyone comfortable. Celine turned slowly. Her voice was deadly calm. Comfortable? My daughter was beaten with a bat and left in a coma. You changed it to a fall. Does that make you comfortable? The man straightened his tie, avoiding her gaze. These situations can be complicated. Celine threw the file onto the table. The papers scattered everywhere. "You call this justice?" she said. "You're all protecting the people who did this." The man didn't answer. He just left the room quietly. Celine closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to breathe. Then a memory flashed, years ago, when she had trained peace officers at the academy. She had taught them how to defend the innocent, how to tell the truth no matter what. One of her best trainees had been Nolan Jonas. He was now a school security officer, and stationed at Briarwood High. Her eyes opened. A plan began to form. If the hospital and the school were both under the Kellens' thumb, she would go around them. She pulled out her phone. The time read 2:03 a.m. She dialed a number. "Hello?" A sleepy voice answered. "Jonas," she said firmly. "It's Celine Ward. You owe me the truth." Silence. Then the sound of a deep sigh. He knew exactly what she meant. The next morning, the flag at Briarwood High waved softly in the wind, but inside the school, the air was thick with unease. Celine Ward walked through the hall with steady steps. Her dark coat swung behind her. Beside her was Officer Nolan Jonas, his uniform wrinkled from a sleepless night. They entered Principal Marion Harlan's office. The woman sat behind a glass desk, her smile professional and fake. Beside her sat Vice Principal Halverson, scribbling in his notebook like always. "What do you want, Mrs. Ward?" Harlan asked coolly. "I want all the security footage from Block A, the hallway where my daughter was attacked." Halverson looked up, smirking. "Unfortunately, the cameras were under maintenance that day. There's nothing to see." "Really?" Celine's tone was sharp. "How convenient." "Just a technical issue," Halverson said flatly. Harlan pushed a thin folder across the desk. "Here's the official report. It was ruled an accidental fall. No evidence of assault." Celine opened it. The words blurred for a moment as rage filled her chest. "I saw her injuries," she said slowly. "She didn't fall. She was beaten. And you both know it." Halverson frowned. "Watch your tone, Mrs. Ward. You're accusing us of something serious." Celine slammed her hand on the desk, making the glass shake. The papers jumped. Jonas tensed, ready to step in if needed. Harlan didn't flinch. "Without video footage, there's no proof. I suggest you calm down before making baseless claims." Celine straightened. Her eyes met Jonas's, a silent reminder of who he used to be, what she'd taught him. Then she turned and walked out. As the office door closed, Jonas caught her arm and whispered, "The maintenance logs don't match. Someone changed the time last night." Celine froze. "You're sure?" He nodded firmly. "I was your student. I know when a record's been altered. Someone's covering this up." Celine's eyes lit with determination. "If there's no camera, then we'll find another lens." She took out her phone, typing fast. Somewhere out there, someone had the truth, and she was going to find them. And when she did, Briarwood High would never be the same again. Briarwood High's computer lab was at the end of the third-floor hallway. The place always had a strange kind of glow, bathed in the pale blue light from the rows of computer screens. The soft hum of the machines filled the air. This was Miss Patel's territory, the information technology teacher who everyone both feared and admired. Miss Patel was small, with dark, watchful eyes and a calm confidence that could silence even the loudest student. She was famous for her discipline. People called her the living firewall. But unlike the school security software, she cared deeply for her students. She was the one they trusted when things went wrong. That morning, the media club students were quietly working when the door suddenly opened. Celine Ward stepped in. Tall, with sharp features and eyes that looked like they could slice through lies, she walked straight to Miss Patel's desk. Every student turned to stare. "I need the original video of the attack on my daughter," Celine said firmly, "before someone deletes it." Miss Patel didn't ask for details. She simply nodded. "Nina, Deshawn, Ivy, help her." The three students jumped into action. Nina Tran, a thin girl with glasses, took the main computer. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she opened the school's video archives. Deshaun Blake, tall and calm, flipped open his laptop to check the back-end servers. Ivy Morales, a curly-haired Latina girl, opened her phone and started searching social media for any clips that might have survived. "I saw a few videos this morning," Ivy said, scrolling. "But now they're gone." "Gone?" Celine asked. "Yeah," Ivy replied, frowning. "Not deleted by the users. Taken down. All of them. Why would someone do that?" Miss Patel asked quietly. "They said it was copyright infringement," Ivy said, shaking her head. "But that makes no sense. It's just a student recording." Nina's brow furrowed. "Something's off," she murmured. On her screen, lines of code flashed as she traced the takedown requests through the school servers. The students leaned in as she worked, the room silent except for the rapid clicking of keys. Then Nina froze. "No way. What is it?" Deshaun asked. "The IP address," Nina said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's coming from the County Board of Education's server." Everyone stopped. The hum of the cooling fans was the only sound left. "Wait," Ivy said slowly. "The board president is Richard Kellen." Celine's jaw tightened. Her mind replayed everything that had happened. Her daughter, Liana, beaten in the hallway by other students, the video spreading online, and now, someone powerful was trying to erase it all. Deshaun clenched his fists. So the cover-up goes all the way to the top. Miss Patel took off her glasses and rubbed the lenses with a cloth. Then she looked up, her eyes clear and serious. "I'll keep these files on a private server," she said. "And I'll make you a secure copy." Celine nodded, saying nothing, but her eyes showed gratitude and fury. Nina printed out the IP logs. Her hands were shaking as she handed them to Celine. The white paper, filled with black numbers and timestamps, looked simple, but it was proof. Real, dangerous proof. Celine folded the papers and slipped them into her coat pocket. "Good," she said quietly. "Now I know where to go." No one in the room dared to speak. As Celine walked out, the students felt like they had just witnessed the beginning of something big. That morning, the County Board of Education building was officially closed to the public. A shiny brass plate outside the front door read, "Closed session, school safety meeting." But everyone inside knew the truth. This was no regular meeting. It was damage control. Inside, the boardroom was lined with green carpet and a long oval table polished to a mirror shine. The air was heavy with tension. Sitting at the head of the table was Richard Kellen, the board president. He was a man with silver streaks in his hair and a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked up when the doors opened. Celine Ward entered, straight-backed, eyes sharp as steel. Next to her was Camilla Frost, a young but already well-known lawyer with a reputation for being fearless in court. Her black suit was crisp, her gaze razor-sharp. Even the board members seemed uneasy as she walked in. "Mrs. Ward." "Miss Frost," Richard greeted smoothly, pretending calm. "Shall we begin?" Camilla didn't waste time. She stood straight and spoke firmly. "We are requesting that the board immediately secure all digital data related to the Briarwood High incident. That includes security camera footage, emails, and any student or hospital records that may have been altered." A few board members exchanged nervous looks. Richard leaned back in his chair. "That's a serious accusation," he said with a fake smile. "Do you have any evidence that such tampering occurred?" Celine didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a stack of papers from her bag and placed them in the middle of the table. "Here," she said coldly. "These are IP logs showing a burner account that sent copyright takedown requests for the video. The IP traces directly to this board's office." The room erupted in whispers. One board member coughed awkwardly. Another looked down, avoiding Richard's gaze. Richard picked up the papers with 2 fingers, smiling as if holding something unimportant. "A technical coincidence," he said smoothly. "Anyone could fake an IP. Mrs. Ward, I suggest you calm down. We can settle this quietly. For your daughter's sake." The threat was soft but unmistakable. Celine's eyes didn't waver. She stayed silent. Camila stepped forward and pulled another folder from her briefcase. "This is a temporary court order from the district judge," she said clearly. "Effective immediately. Any deletion, modification, or hiding of evidence will be treated as obstruction of justice, a federal crime." Gasps filled the room. One board member muttered, "A court order? Already?" Richard's smile finally cracked for a moment, but he quickly regained it. He rested his chin on his hand and stared at Celine with eyes full of calculation. "You want to play the legal game," he said quietly. "Fine. But remember, games can have more than one ending." Celine met his gaze, unflinching. She'd seen that same smile before, from men who thought power could hide the truth. When the meeting ended, the board members rushed to collect their papers, eager to leave. Camila packed up her documents, her expression cool but satisfied. "We forced his hand," she whispered to Celine as they walked out. "Now he knows we're coming." Behind them, Richard Kellen sat alone at the table. His smile had completely vanished. He pulled out his phone, his voice low and hard. "Activate Plan C," he said. "The nurse." On the other end, someone replied simply, "Roger." The war over the truth had just begun. That night, the hospital where Liana Ward lay unconscious was quiet. The ICU lights glowed cold and white, like the inside of a machine. Celine walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly. She entered the medical records room, a maze of shelves stacked with papers and files. Inside was a young nurse, Clara, her hands trembling as she held a pencil. When she saw Celine, she froze. "I need the truth," Celine said calmly but firmly. "Who asked you to change the medical records?" Clara swallowed hard and looked toward the administrator, an older man with gray hair, who was pretending to check files. In the corner, a hospital security officer stood watching silently, arms crossed. Celine stepped closer. "You called Dr. Dashrow that night," she said. "You told him someone interfered. Say it again." Clara's lip trembled. Then she finally whispered, "It was an email. From a law firm. They said they represented the Kellen Foundation." The administrator slammed his hand on the desk. "That's enough, Clara. You're not authorized to discuss this." Celine turned to him, her eyes sharp. "And you're not authorized to falsify a dying child's records." The officer took a half step forward, but Celine didn't move. "Touch me," she said coldly, "and you'll have to explain to a court why you obstructed an investigation." The room froze. Finally, Clara reached into her drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. Her hands were shaking as she handed them to Celine. "This is the original report," she whispered. "Before they changed it. I kept a copy." Celine unfolded it. The words were clear. Cause of injury, hit with a stick. Not a fall. Not an accident. The truth. But Clara wasn't done. She leaned closer, whispering quickly, "There's something else. Dr. Dashrow uses a digital stethoscope, one that records audio. That night, he was on a phone call and forgot to turn it off. The call about editing the record might still be saved." Celine's eyes widened slightly. "You mean he accidentally recorded the order?" Clara nodded. Celine smiled faintly, a cold, determined smile. The evidence wasn't just written now. It had a voice. The administrator lunged to grab the papers, but Celine moved like lightning, tucking them safely into her coat. The officer froze again, unsure what to do. "From now on," Celine said softly to Clara, "you're not alone." Then she walked out, already typing on her phone. She sent everything, the documents, the information about the recording, to Camila Frost. Her message was short. There's voice evidence. Prepare for court. The fight was far from over. Later that evening, the smell of wood and sweat filled the air as Celine and Sergeant Nolan Jonas entered the school's baseball equipment room. The small space was crowded with gloves, helmets, and bats stacked against the walls. Coach Mercer, a large man with a rough voice, stood waiting. "I don't know why you're here," he said gruffly. The bat's gone. Students borrow them all the time. They get lost. Lost. Celine repeated quietly. The bat that struck my daughter is lost? Jonas stepped forward. Coach, she has the right to ask. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to seal the room. Mercer went pale. Seal it? This is a locker room, not a crime scene. Celine watched him closely. He wasn't just nervous, he was hiding something. Jonas scanned the ceiling and noticed a small camera tucked behind a shelf. What's this? A secondary system? Mercer hesitated. Maintenance, he muttered. Jonas ignored him and connected a laptop to the feed. After a few clicks, a video appeared, black and white, recorded late at night. A figure entered the room, moving quietly. Brandon M., the baseball team manager. He opened a shelf, pulled out a bat wrapped in plastic, and started to leave. Then the hallway door opened. Light spilled in, revealing another face. Vice Principal Halverson. He nodded at Brandon, motioning for him to go. The video froze. This, Jonas said slowly, is the murder weapon. And the man helping him is Halverson. Celine's lips curved into a cold smile. When the weapon walks away, it's because someone powerful opened the door. Mercer stammered, sweating. I didn't know. They told me not to touch the backup camera. Celine didn't reply. She turned and walked out, her steps steady and full of purpose. Outside, the school bell rang. Students filled the hallway, laughing and talking. Celine stopped and pulled out her phone. She sent a short message to Halverson. We need to talk. In front of everyone. Moments later, she was standing in the middle of the hallway. The crowd grew quiet. Phones came out. Students started live streaming. Halverson appeared at the end of the corridor, trying to blend in with the students. But it was too late. Celine's voice rang through the hallway. Who opened the equipment room door at 4:03 a.m.? Silence. Halverson froze. The students began to whisper. Screens lit up. Comments flashed. Then Ivy Morales stepped out from the back, holding her phone connected to the hallway TV. In seconds, the big screen came to life, showing the exact clip. Brandon stealing the bat. Halverson's voice, clear and undeniable. Hurry up. The truth was now public. And no amount of power could stop what was coming next. The crowd exploded into chaos. People were shouting, some crying out in disbelief. Phones lit up everywhere as students started recording. Someone screamed, "Oh my God, it's him! The vice principal!" Another voice yelled, "Go live! Stream this now!" The hallway of Briarwood High was full of noise. Footsteps, gasps, camera clicks, and the steady hum of 1,000 notifications going off at once. Vice Principal Halverson looked terrified. His face had turned completely pale, and sweat dripped from his forehead even though the hallway was cold. His lips trembled. I was just following orders," he stammered, glancing from one student to another. "It wasn't my decision." Celine Ward stepped forward through the crowd. She looked calm on the outside, but her eyes were sharp, cold, and furious. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Whose orders, Halverson?" she asked. "Say it clearly so everyone can hear." Halverson's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked trapped, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. The students moved closer, holding up their phones to capture every word. Finally, he broke. "It was Principal Harlan," he shouted. "She told me to protect the donor's property. She said the cane belonged to the Kellen Foundation. I didn't dare argue with her." His confession hit the hallway like a bomb. A wave of shocked voices rose all at once. Some students screamed. Others swore under their breath. Within seconds, the live stream numbers on social media shot up. Comments flooded in. The principal was part of it. The Kellens own the school. Cover-up exposed. Celine didn't need to yell. She simply turned toward the crowd and spoke clearly so everyone could hear over the chaos. "You see," she said, The truth doesn't hide in fancy offices or polished reports. It lives here, in the hands of those brave enough to show it. Halverson looked ready to faint. His legs shook, and he leaned against the wall for balance. Students were cheering now, raising their phones, chanting together, "Justice for Liana! Justice for Liana!" The chant rolled down the hallway like thunder, growing louder with every voice that joined in. Far away, in a quiet office filled with luxury furniture and glowing screens, Brandon Kellen watched the live stream. The video showed the chanting students, Celine standing strong in the middle. His jaw tightened. His face turned red with rage. He slammed his fist on the desk so hard that pens jumped. "That woman wants war," he growled. "Fine. I'll show her what war really is." The wave of truth had broken through Briarwood High, and the people in charge were scrambling. Within hours, Principal Marion Harlan called an emergency meeting. Her plan was simple: twist the story, blame Celine, and protect her job. The next morning, the school auditorium was so full that people had to stand along the walls. Students filled every seat, parents whispered nervously, and reporters from local papers set up cameras in the aisles. Even the local TV channel was broadcasting the meeting live online. The air inside was heavy, tense, and electric. It felt like everyone was waiting for an explosion. On the stage, Principal Harlan stood tall in a dark blue dress. She held a folder of papers and pretended to smile. Next to her sat Richard Kellen, the school's biggest donor and Brandon's father. He looked calm, but his eyes gleamed with quiet arrogance. Down in the front row, Celine Ward sat beside Evan Camilla Frost. Celine's arms were crossed, her face emotionless. Camilla looked focused and ready, her briefcase resting neatly beside her. When the cameras were ready, Harlan stepped up to the microphone. Her voice echoed through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "our internal investigation shows there is no solid proof of violence. The rumors spreading online are false and damaging to Briarwood High's reputation." A few parents nodded uncertainly, but many students laughed or whispered angrily. Celine stood up, her voice ringing out. "No violence," she repeated. "My daughter is in a coma with a broken shoulder and a concussion. You call that no violence?" The entire room went silent for a moment. Harlan's smile twitched. Camilla walked to the podium beside Celine, opening her briefcase with calm precision. "If Principal Harlan insists there was no violence," she said, "then let's show what we've found." She held up several documents. First, IP logs proving the Board of Education office tried to remove the original video. Second, an email from Kellen's law firm to the hospital, asking them to change the report from "hit with a cane" to "accidental fall." Third, a security video showing Brandon M. sneaking into the supply closet at night, with Vice Principal Halverson unlocking the door for him. And fourth, Halverson's own confession that the order came from Principal Harlan herself. Gasps filled the room. People stood up, talking loudly, pointing at the stage. Reporters started whispering into microphones. Harlan tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. "These so-called documents can be faked," she said quickly. "They have no legal value." Celine took a slow step forward, her voice rising. "Then what about this?" Suddenly, the lights went out. A large screen behind the stage flickered to life. At the tech table, Nina Tran from the media club pressed play. The restored original video appeared for everyone to see. The hallway of Block A appeared on the screen. Liana stood there, cornered. Then Brandon Kellen lifted a baseball bat. A scream. A swing. The sound of impact echoed through the auditorium speakers. For one heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the audience erupted. Parents shouted. Students cried and cursed. Reporters filmed everything. Online, the live stream comments exploded. "It's clear now. Kellen covered it up. Justice for Liana." Principal Harlan went pale. Richard Kellen jumped up, ran to the console, and yanked the projector cable out. The screen went black, but it didn't matter. Dozens of phones had already recorded the video. It was all over the internet within minutes. #JusticeForLiana trended like wildfire. What had started as a school scandal was now a national movement. Celine stared at Richard Kellen and said calmly, "You can turn off the projector, but you can't turn off the truth. When the light comes on, those who hide in the dark have nowhere left to run." Richard clenched his fists and pulled out his phone. "Plan B has failed," he muttered. "Start the next one." Celine knew the battle had only just begun. The next morning, the Briarwood County Courthouse was packed. Reporters filled the benches, microphones hidden under their coats. This wasn't a full trial, but a digital search warrant hearing that could change everything. Camilla Frost stood tall at the plaintiff's table, neat in her gray suit. Celine sat beside her, silent but fierce, like a soldier before a final mission. Across from them sat Leonard Mercer, the Kellen family's Evan, looking smug and confident. Judge Morales entered, and the courtroom fell quiet. "Court is now in session," she said firmly. Camilla began immediately. "Your Honor, we request a digital search warrant for Principal Marion Harlan's devices and the Kellen Foundation's office. We have strong evidence of data deletion, falsified records, and hidden weapons." The audience murmured in excitement. Mercer jumped up. "Objection! This is an invasion of privacy. The Kellen Foundation funds our schools. If you allow this, every student's education could be at risk." Judge Morales frowned. "Mr. Mercer, address the law, not sympathy." Camilla lifted her papers again. "We have IP logs from the Board of Education server, hospital emails altered by Kellen's firm, and a security video showing their direct involvement. This isn't kindness, it's corruption." Mercer sneered. "Those files could be forged. The emails were hacked. IP logs are easy to fake." Camilla took one confident step forward. "Then let an independent team check the devices themselves. If the defendants are innocent, they have nothing to hide. But if they refuse, that refusal will speak louder than any confession." The room went still. Everyone looked at the judge. Mercer tried one last argument. "Your Honor, this could set a dangerous example. Searching a school's servers." Judge Morales cut him off. "The real danger," she said coldly, "is a child lying in a hospital bed while adults rewrite the truth." She signed the order with one strong motion. "The search warrant is approved. A third-party digital forensics team will begin immediately. Any deletions or data changes from this moment will count as obstruction of justice." The courtroom exploded in noise. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Cameras flashed in Camilla's face. Celine took a deep breath. Her eyes were tired, but there was still fire in them. Mercer leaned forward, forcing a smirk. "You think you've won, Frost? Data never stands still. Remember that." Camilla didn't flinch. "From today on," she said clearly, "every email you've ever sent will be evidence." The reporters caught it instantly. Within minutes, the quote, "every email will be evidence," was trending across every news feed. Judge Morales hit the gavel again. Court dismissed. But everyone knew the real war was only beginning. Outside the courthouse, investigator Nolan Jonas received a text from Camilla. "Warrant signed. Deploy now." He nodded, gathered his forensic team, and headed straight for Briarwood High. Their job was to collect every device, every server, and every hidden file. That evening, the sun set over Briarwood's empty baseball field. The sky glowed red and orange, painting the wet grass in shadows. The bleachers were deserted, the scoreboard dark. The air smelled of damp earth and secrets. Celine Ward stood in the middle of the field, her coat flapping in the wind. Beside her, Nolan Jonas switched on his flashlight. The beam swept across the grass. In the distance, a student ran toward them, Deshaun Blake, from the media club. He was breathing hard. "Ms. Ward," he called out. "I overheard Brandon talking on the phone. He said something was buried under the field. I think it's near the south bleachers. I saw fresh dirt there last night." Celine's eyes sharpened. "Show us." They ran to the far corner of the field. The grass there had been dug up and pressed down again, but the soil was still soft and uneven. Jonas raised a hand. "Shovel," he ordered. An officer brought one forward. The metallic clang of digging filled the quiet field. Each scoop of dirt seemed to slice through the heavy silence that had covered the school for so long. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something solid. Jonas knelt down and brushed the dirt away. A black plastic bag appeared. Celine crouched, grabbed it, and tore it open. Inside was a baseball bat, wooden, scratched, and streaked with dried brown stains. Everyone froze. Deshawn's voice shook. That's it. That's the bat Brandon used on Liana. Jonas slipped on gloves and carefully sealed the weapon in an evidence bag. Celine stared at the bat. A faint line of orange paint ran along the top. Look, she said quietly. That's locker paint. Locker A17, where Liana fell. It was undeniable proof. Police officers led Brandon M. across the field in handcuffs. He looked panicked, shouting, "You can't do this. I didn't hit her. I was just following orders." Celine faced him squarely. "You buried the bat. You buried the truth. Don't pretend you're innocent." Brandon's voice cracked. "I'm calling Mercer. He'll fix this." He tried to grab his phone, but Jonas snatched it away and handed it to the officers. "No lawyer can fix what you've done," Jonas said. Beyond the fence, students were gathering again. Dozens of phones were raised, live streams already running. The image of the muddy bat inside the clear plastic bag spread online within seconds. Comments flooded in. They found it. Finally, justice. No more hiding. Celine stood still, eyes locked on the bat. The sight brought back the memory she couldn't forget. Liana lying on the hallway floor, blood near her temple, her hands trembling. Now the truth was in front of her, solid and undeniable. Jonas placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've got it," he said quietly. "This will finish the case." Celine nodded slowly. "We have the weapon," she said, "but my daughter is still in a coma. Justice isn't complete until she wakes up." As the police took Brandon away, his angry shouts were lost in the wind. The sunset bled across the field, and the muddy bat, streaked with orange paint, became a symbol of the truth that could no longer be buried. Late that night, Celine returned to St. Aura Hospital. In the ICU, the white light glowed coldly over Liana's bed. Machines beeped in steady rhythm. Tubes and wires surrounded her daughter's still body. The air smelled of disinfectant and quiet sorrow. Celine sat beside the bed and took Liana's cold hand in hers. She squeezed gently, trying to share her warmth, whispering, "I'm here, baby. I'm still fighting." The door opened softly, and Dr. Adrian Cross stepped in with a file in his hands. His face was serious. "Ms. Ward," he said quietly, "Liana's condition hasn't changed. She may remain in a coma for some time. You should prepare for all possibilities." Celine's eyes didn't move from her daughter's face. "I'm not preparing for loss," she said. "I'm preparing for victory." The doctor nodded slowly. "We'll keep doing everything we can," he said before leaving the room. Celine opened her worn military notebook, the one she had carried since her days as a Special Forces advisor. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded. She turned to a page marked with a blood-stained piece of paper. On it were 6 simple words: "Discipline is the destruction of chaos." She read them again and again. They reminded her of the cold mornings of training, the endless runs in mud, the sleepless nights under rain. Discipline had saved lives on the battlefield. Now it would save her daughter, and expose every lie in Briarwood. Leaning close to Liana, she whispered, "I promise you, my girl, I won't smash the wall with anger. I'll pull out every nail, every beam, every rotten piece until the whole thing collapses under its own weight." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. This was not a moment for tears. This was a moment for planning, for patience, and for strength. Outside the hospital window, the lights of Briarwood flickered like distant stars. Inside, the steady beeping of Liana's heart monitor echoed softly. Celine tightened her grip on her daughter's hand and whispered one last time, "The truth doesn't die, Liana. It waits to be found. And I swear, I'll find every last piece." She took out her phone and opened her Notes app. Her fingers moved fast across the screen, typing one line after another. Class action. Bring parents together to file a lawsuit against the school board for covering up school violence. Administrative discipline. Ask the school district to open an investigation and suspend Principal Harlan, Vice Principal Halverson, and any other administrators involved. Safety reform. Suggest new school safety measures. Install independent cameras and hire third-party monitors to review footage. Each line she wrote felt like a bullet being loaded into a gun chamber, not to be fired recklessly, but to aim carefully and strike the heart of her enemy. Celine Ward finished typing, locked her phone, and sat up straight. The white hospital light reflected in her determined eyes. She knew that destruction didn't always mean smashing something with force. True demolition meant pulling out the nails that held up a rotten structure until it collapsed under its own weight. Outside the ICU, a few parents had gathered in the hospital hallway. Their voices were low but intense. They whispered about the viral video that had just surfaced, about the weapon that had finally been found, and about the truth that had been hidden for far too long. A young mother, holding her little girl in her arms, murmured, "If Liana were my child, I'd want justice too." A father clenched his fists and growled, "We've been quiet for too long." Messages started flooding into Celine's phone. Parents, students, and even Briarwood alumni from other states were sending messages of support. They all used the hashtag #Justice4A, demanding a community meeting and real accountability. The spark that Celine had started was growing fast. It was no longer just a few angry parents. It was a movement. Celine stood up, leaned over the hospital bed, and kissed Liana softly on the forehead. "Go to sleep, baby. When you open your eyes, the world will be different." She straightened, turned toward the ICU door, and stepped out into the hallway where dozens of parents were waiting. Their eyes were full of hope and fire, their phones glowing as they recorded, and their voices filled the air. Celine took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "We're not just fighting for Liana. We're fighting for every child in Briarwood. We'll fight smart, we'll fight with the law, and we'll fight until no one has to be scared again." The crowd burst into applause and cheers. Someone started chanting, "Justice for Liana," and soon the entire hallway echoed with the sound. Celine could feel it deep inside. Real power didn't come from one person. It came from people standing together, refusing to stay silent. She knew this was the start. Demolition didn't mean breaking down bricks. It meant pulling out the nails that held the corruption in place. The next morning, hundreds of parents gathered outside Briarwood High. They held banners and posters high above their heads. The early sunlight glowed off the paint of their handmade signs. Celine stood in the middle of them, calm but strong. What had begun as a mother's promise in the ICU was now a full campaign against the system that had failed her daughter. That evening, the parking lot behind Briarwood High was dark except for a few flickering streetlights. The wind blew through the trees, scattering the Justice for Liana flyers across the ground. Celine stood waiting, her shadow sharp under the light. Beside her, Nina Tran clutched her laptop. Both women looked exhausted but alert. A silver car rolled into the lot, headlights turning off as soon as it stopped. The door opened, and Ms. Alvarez, the school's math teacher, stepped out. Normally neat and confident, she looked completely worn out. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. She hugged her bag close to her chest as she walked toward them. "Thank you for coming," Celine said quietly but firmly. Alvarez glanced around nervously, as if she expected someone to be watching. Her voice shook. I can't stay silent anymore. After what I saw, after what happened to Liana, I can't do this anymore." Nina's voice was low and cold. "You saw everything and you didn't do anything." Tears streamed down Alvarez's face. "I know. I was scared. Scared of losing my job, scared of Harlan, scared of everything. But I was more afraid of seeing my students get hurt and doing nothing. I hear Liana's screams in my dreams. I can't sleep." The wind whistled softly through the lot. Alvarez reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out a stack of papers. "This," she said, voice shaking, "is an email from Harlan. She sent it to every teacher right after the incident. It says, 'No involvement. No comment. Anything that could harm the Kellen Foundation's funding must be avoided. Nina's eyes widened. She actually wrote that? Alvarez nodded weakly. I read it. I knew it was wrong. But I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't my problem. But when I saw Liana lying in a hospital bed, I knew I was part of the problem. Celine took the stack of papers, reading quickly. The words were short, cold, and undeniable. She paused at the final line. CC, State Board of Education. Celine narrowed her eyes. She didn't just silence you. She bragged to her bosses that she had it under control. This isn't fear, it's corruption. Nina opened her laptop and began checking the email's data. Her fingers flew across the keys. It's real, she said. No edits. Timestamps match the night of the attack. This, Celine said, is the knife that cut straight into Harlan's lies. Alvarez broke down crying. I deserve to be hated. But if I come clean, if I release this, I can finally sleep. Celine rested a hand on her shoulder. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means doing what's right while you're scared. And tonight, you did that. Nina started recording a video. In it, Alvarez's voice trembled but didn't break. I was silent. I'm sorry, Liana. I won't be silent again. Just saying those words seemed to lift the weight off her. The streetlight caught her tear-stained face as she handed the evidence to Celine. Send this to Camila, Celine said. She'll know when to use it. Nina nodded, typing fast. Encrypted and sent. Celine looked up at the night sky. This was it, the moment when silence turned into truth. One person's apology could change everything. The next morning, lawyer Camila Frost filed the email as evidence in court. News exploded across the city. Headline, leaked email. Principal told teachers to stay silent to protect Kellen Foundation. Reporters rushed to the story. People were furious. That afternoon, the fanciest hotel in Briarwood was packed. On the 12th floor, the Kellen Foundation was holding a press conference. Richard Kellen stood at the podium in a dark blue suit and red tie. The logo of his foundation glowed behind him. Cameras flashed non-stop. He looked calm, but his tight jaw gave him away. Ladies and gentlemen, he began smoothly, the Kellen Foundation has always supported education in Briarwood. Unfortunately, false claims and fake videos have forced us to suspend all funding to Briarwood High until our name is cleared. Gasps filled the room. Reporters jumped up. One shouted, "What about the original video showing your son hitting Liana Reyes?" Richard's face froze for a split second, but he quickly smiled again. That clip is clearly edited. Anyone can fake a video these days. Another reporter called out, "But the court has approved a digital search warrant. Why not cooperate if you're innocent?" If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and share your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a heart to show your support. Richard's smile tightened. We will cooperate within the law. But remember, we are victims of lies and manipulation. At the back of the room, Celine sat quietly, wearing a black cap. She didn't need to speak. The more he dodged, the guiltier he looked. Beside her, Camila took careful notes. Then a local reporter, not from a big newspaper, stood up. If the Kellen Foundation stops funding Briarwood High, what happens to the school? Does one family control its survival? Richard grinned, thinking this question would work in his favor. Without our support, the school would lose scholarships, sports programs, and many activities. Ask yourselves, can small businesses replace us? The doors at the back suddenly opened. A group of people walked in, local business owners. A supermarket owner, a factory manager, a car dealer, even a small tech startup founder. Linda Marquez, the supermarket owner, stepped forward. We can, and we will. Her voice was strong and steady. If Briarwood High allows an independent investigation and suspends Principal Harlan, she said, we, the Briarwood Business Coalition, will replace every dollar the Kellen Foundation pulls. The room exploded in noise. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Richard's face turned red. "This is a political attack," he yelled. Linda stared at him down. "No, Mr. Kellen. You used money to buy silence. We're using money to buy the truth." At the back, Celine smiled for the first time in days. The tide was turning. Community power was stronger than corruption. Within hours, every major news site had breaking headlines. Local businesses replace Kellen Foundation. Call for the principal's suspension. Hashtag Justice for Liana and hashtag New Briarwood were trending everywhere. Richard left the stage, cameras blinding him. His forced smile couldn't hide his anger. In the hotel lobby, a reporter spotted Celine. "Mrs. Ward, what do you think about the Kellen Foundation's decision?" Celine replied, "It's like a knife cutting through lies. One day, he'll wish he'd just walked away with his money instead of covering up a crime. Money used to buy silence. Now, it buys the truth." That night, the Briarwood Board of Trustees held an emergency meeting. The large conference hall was overflowing with parents and students. Reporters stood along the walls. Live streams ran non-stop. At the front sat the 7 board members. Facing them were Principal Harlan, Vice Principal Halverson, and Coach Mercer. Across from them sat Celine Ward, Evan Camilla Frost, and the parent representatives. The chairman banged his gavel. "We are here to review evidence and vote on administrative action." Camilla stood up first. "We have digital logs, video footage, witness statements, and now, emails proving a cover-up. The weapon found in the schoolyard has Liana's blood and the same paint as locker A17. That's undeniable." Applause and shouts of "Justice for Liana" filled the room. Harlan stood, her face pale. "This is a witch hunt. I only tried to protect the school's reputation. If anyone's to blame, it's Halverson. He opened the warehouse that night." All eyes turned to Halverson. He hesitated, then pulled an email from his briefcase. His voice cracked. "No, I was following her direct orders. She told me, make sure Kellen's tools aren't taken by police." The room went silent for a second, then erupted. Camilla snapped a photo of the email before Harlan could grab it. The chairman frowned. "Ms. Harlan, do you deny this?" She stammered, sweat dripping down her temples. That's not what I meant." Halverson laughed bitterly. "Your words made me the scapegoat. But not tonight." Parents shouted, "Suspend her! Justice for the students." After a short discussion, the board announced, Principal Harlan, suspended pending investigation. Vice Principal Halverson, suspended for breaking school safety rules. Coach Mercer, suspended for hiding evidence. The room exploded with cheers. Harlan shouted, "You'll regret this. Kellen won't stand by." But her mic was cut off as security led her away. Then the chairman read the final statement. Brandon Kellen is now officially listed as a suspect. The crowd gasped, then cheered louder than ever. Celine closed her eyes. For the first time, the boy who hurt her daughter had been named. Camilla leaned over. "We've taken down the top," she whispered. "Now it's time for the one with the bat." That night, police sirens wailed through Briarwood. In the interrogation room, the air was cold and heavy. The fluorescent lights shone on the metal table. Brandon Kellen sat with arms crossed, wearing his school jacket, his face full of arrogance. His lawyer, Mark Price, sat beside him, calm but nervous. Detective Nolan Jonas placed an evidence bag on the table. Inside was a baseball bat. Behind the one-way glass, Celine stood watching, her eyes sharp as steel. Jonas said calmly, "Brandon, your name appears in the original video. The bat has Liana's blood. The paint matches locker A17, the place where she fell. Explain." Brandon leaned back. "I defended myself. She came at me first. I didn't mean to hurt her." Jonas slammed the bat down on the table. The loud clang echoed. "Self-defense," he said, pointing to the orange paint. "That's paint from locker A17. You call this self-defense?" Brandon swallowed hard. "Who knows? Maybe it was staged. Jonas said nothing. The silence in the room was sharper than any words. He turned on the small screen next to him. The original video started playing, the one everyone in the room had been avoiding watching for days. It showed Liana being dragged across the gym floor, her terrified screams echoing. Brandon appeared in the frame, raising a baseball bat, his face twisted with anger. He swung it down hard. There was a crash, the sound of metal hitting something, and then more screaming. The room was small, the air heavy and suffocating. Every sound from the video bounced off the walls, impossible to escape. Brandon's face on the screen was clear. There was no mistake. It was him. He couldn't look away. Across from him, his lawyer, Evan Price, adjusted his tie nervously. He leaned toward Brandon and whispered, "Don't say anything more. Stay quiet." But Brandon was trembling. The pressure had been building since they started the questioning. His fingers tapped against the table, the sound sharp in the tense silence. Finally, he snapped. "All right, fine," he blurted out, his voice filled with irritation. "I did it because Coach Mercer told me to. He said if something happened, we should cover it up." Brandon's words came faster now, spilling out before he could stop himself. He said the sponsor would take care of everything. The room froze. Jonas, the investigator, stared at him, his eyes narrowing. Slowly, he repeated Brandon's words, as if tasting every syllable. "You just said Mercer told you to cover it up because the sponsor would take care of everything. Are you absolutely sure about that?" Evan Price jumped up from his chair. "Objection," he said quickly. "That statement isn't official testimony and cannot be used on record." But Jonas raised his hand calmly, not taking his eyes off Brandon. "Mr. Price, the cameras are recording, and your client said it himself." Dillard's face fell. The air felt thick enough to choke on. Brandon's face went white. His lips trembled, and sweat rolled down his forehead. He looked lost. I wasn't saying that." Jonas tapped the table softly but firmly, cutting him off. "Thank you, Brandon. That statement will be added to the record." His tone hardened. "From now on, this isn't just about a school fight. This is a full-blown conspiracy." Behind the one-way glass, Celine Ward stood watching, her fists clenched so tightly her nails cut into her palms. She didn't need to yell or storm in. Brandon's one careless sentence had done what no one else had managed. It cracked open the wall of silence that the Kellen family had built around this case. Evan Price tried to call for a pause, but it was too late. The cameras had already captured the confession. Every second was being saved, every word recorded. Jonas gathered his papers and stood. "Today's interrogation is over," he said flatly. "The file will be sent to the prosecutor for criminal charges." His eyes turned cold as he looked at Brandon. "You should pray, Mr. Kellen, because from now on, you're not just a student. You're a criminal suspect." Brandon slumped in his chair, his head hanging low. The arrogance he once carried was gone. Panic replaced it. Lies could be built by many people, but all it took was one slip of the tongue to destroy them. The next morning, the Briarwood County Prosecutor's Office received the entire case file, the original video, the bloodied bat, and Brandon's confession. On the new file cover were the words, "For consideration of criminal prosecution, aggravated assault and obstruction of justice." That same afternoon, downtown Briarwood filled with thousands of people. Parents, students, teachers, alumni, and local residents flooded the main square. They carried banners that read "Protect Liana" and "Justice for Students." The noise was thunderous. Chanting, clapping, people shouting into megaphones. Television cameras on the City Hall roof captured everything. The waving flags, the bright signs, and the glowing phone screens live-streaming to millions. At the center of it all stood Celine Ward. She was on a small wooden platform, holding a microphone, her face illuminated by the fading sunlight. Behind her stood Nina, Deshawn, and Ivy, the young students who had live-streamed the events that uncovered the truth. They were now leading the global online movement. The signs around them were clear. No more hiding. Student safety first. Justice is not optional. Celine took a breath, her voice powerful as it echoed through the speakers. "We're not here just for Liana," she said. "We're here for every student who's ever walked into a school and wondered, will I be protected? Will the truth be buried if something happens to me?" The crowd cheered, waving their signs. Celine held up a stack of papers. "This," she said, "is the 12-point school safety code. We, the parents, students, and community, wrote it together. These aren't empty promises. These are real rules that must be followed." She began reading them one by one. All school cameras must be monitored by an independent agency, not the school itself. Any evidence from an incident must be kept safe and sent directly to that independent agency. Whistleblowers, whether teachers or students, must be completely protected. A 24/7 hotline will be created for reporting school violence. Any staff member who hides evidence will be immediately suspended. Schools must have emergency procedures coordinated directly with hospitals. Parents must be notified within 24 hours of any serious incident. A monitoring board made up of parents, students, and community members will have the right to inspect and review all cases. Anti-violence training must be given to both teachers and students. Anyone who tampers with records or evidence will face legal punishment. Scholarships must be provided to victims so they can continue their education. No sponsorship or donation can ever be used to silence the truth. When Celine finished, the square erupted in cheers. Hashtags like #ProtectLiana and #12RulesForSafety exploded online, spreading faster than wildfire. But in the corner of the square, a group of protesters held up their own banner, "Don't destroy Briarwood. Don't turn this into politics." They shouted loudly, and for a moment, the cheers died down. TV cameras turned toward them, hoping for drama. Celine raised her hand for silence. She stepped forward and faced the group directly. Her voice was calm but powerful. "We're not tearing down the school," she said. "We're rebuilding it properly. A house with a rotten foundation can't be fixed by painting the walls. To save it, you have to replace the foundation." The crowd went quiet, taking in her words. Then came the thunderous applause. Someone shouted, "Protect Liana. Protect our kids." The chant grew louder and louder, until the whole square roared with one voice. TV cameras caught it all. Celine standing tall, her hand raised, the crowd unified. The moment went viral across the country. Nina zoomed in, tears in her eyes, whispering, "She just changed everything." Deshaun yelled into his live stream, "Briarwood's history is being written right now." Celine held the folder tightly. She knew this was more than a rally. It was a transfer of power, from the rich families who used money to silence people to the community that demanded justice. Then her phone buzzed. The caller ID read St. Allen Hospital. Her heart dropped. She answered quickly and stepped behind the stage. Dr. Adrian's urgent voice came through. "Mrs. Ward, it's Liana. There's a change in her condition. You need to come right now." Celine froze. The crowd around her blurred. For a second, she couldn't move. Then she ran, pushing through people, down the steps, her heart pounding. In the distance, she saw the flashing lights of an ambulance. The fight was moving, from the streets back to where it had begun, the hospital. Dawn crept through the ICU window, casting soft light on the white walls. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. But today, the sound seemed different, like a quiet rhythm of hope. Celine sat beside Liana's bed, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. Her hand still held her daughter's. She hadn't let go once. The door opened gently. Dr. Adrian Cross entered with Nurse Clara. Both looked exhausted, but there was a spark of hope in their eyes. "Any progress?" Celine whispered. Dr. Adrian Cross checked the monitor, then leaned over Liana, shining a small light into her pupils. He took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "Mrs. Ward," he said softly, "maybe today is the day we've been waiting for." Celine's heart stopped. She leaned closer to her daughter. Then, Liana's eyelids fluttered, just slightly, but enough to make Celine gasp. "Liana," she whispered, her voice shaking. Slowly, Liana's eyes opened. The morning light reflected in them. Her lips parted weakly. "Mommy." Celine broke down, tears pouring down her cheeks. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Behind her, Nurse Clara let out a small laugh of relief. "She made it," she said, wiping her own tears. Liana looked around the room, then back at her mother. "I'm alive." Celine nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, you are. And you'll never have to fight alone again." The monitor kept beeping steadily. Now it sounded almost musical. Dr. Adrian Cross smiled. "She's still weak, but this is a miracle. Waking up after so long. It's incredible." Liana closed her eyes again, whispering, "I remember something." Celine leaned in. "Tell me, sweetheart, anything you can remember." Liana's voice was faint but clear. "When I was being dragged, before I blacked out, I heard someone yell, 'Go live!'" The room went silent. Celine's eyes sharpened. "Are you sure?" Liana nodded weakly. "It was Tessa. Tessa Marlowe." The words hit like a shockwave. Clara covered her mouth, gasping. Dr. Adrian Cross's eyes widened. Celine squeezed Liana's hand. "Thank you, baby. You just gave us the last piece of the puzzle." Clara quickly wrote down Liana's words. "This will go into the official record," she said. Celine kissed Liana's forehead. "Rest now. I'll handle the rest." Sunlight filled the room. Liana had survived, and so had the truth. Outside, Celine's phone buzzed. A message from Camila read, "Liana is awake. She remembers. Tessa is going live." Celine replied immediately, "Good. The court will accept it. Prepare a subpoena for Tessa Marlowe." The fight had entered a new phase, not just exposing the truth, but bringing everyone responsible to justice. That afternoon, police knocked on Tessa Marlowe's door with a subpoena. She panicked. She would have to stand in court and testify, to confirm what she'd seen and what she'd shouted that night. A year later, Briarwood was a different town. At the front gate of Briarwood High stood a new marble plaque, the Liana Initiative, Justice for One, Safety for All. Students left flowers and letters there every morning. Inside, the school had changed completely. The lobby had an electronic screen showing safety updates. Incidents were reported publicly. The 12 safety standards were carved into a glass wall, now part of district law. Liana walked through the halls again. A faint scar showed on her shoulder, but her smile was bright. Her classmates stood and clapped. She waved, no longer a victim, but a symbol of strength. At the end of the hallway stood Celine, now the district's official school safety advisor. Her eyes were sharp, her spirit unbroken. Nina, Deshawn, and Ivy were now leaders of the Transparent Media Club, a school-supported group with cameras and a live feed linked to the Center for Transparency and Student Protection. Every report, every case was monitored. No more cover-ups. At the center's opening ceremony, Principal Karen Dri, once an opponent of the Kellen Foundation, stood proudly. "This center," she announced, "will store every report and piece of evidence. It will be overseen by an independent board. No one, not even the principal, can hide the truth." The crowd erupted in applause. The hashtag Liana Initiative trended again, this time filled with hope instead of anger. Celine stepped forward with scissors in hand. She turned to look at Liana, sitting in the front row, and bowed deeply. "You are the reason we all changed," she said. "The day you fell, we thought we had lost everything. But that day became the start of something new." Tears streamed down Liana's face. The crowd stood, applauding endlessly. On the big screen behind them appeared the final court verdicts. Brandon Kellen, guilty of aggravated assault and obstruction of justice. 12 years in prison with mandatory re-education. Coach Mercer, guilty of destroying evidence. 5 years suspended, 2 years probation, banned from working in education. Principal Harlan, guilty of abuse of power and concealing the truth. 8 years in prison, permanently banned from educational work. Justice had finally been served. And for Briarwood, it wasn't just the end of a tragedy. It was the beginning of a new chapter built on truth, safety, and courage. The news spread everywhere, and there was no doubt about it anymore. Parents cheered and hugged each other. Students shouted, waved banners, and chanted. Reporters rushed forward to capture every moment. But in the middle of the noise and celebration, Celine did not smile. She only closed her eyes for a few seconds and took a deep breath of relief. Justice, she thought, might never be perfect, but today, at least, it had found its way. The silver scissors sliced through the red ribbon and dropped to the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Center for Transparency and Student Protection was officially open. A shining metal plate hung near the door, engraved with the words, "Truth is a common property." Celine turned toward the crowd, her face calm but her eyes burning with conviction. Her voice echoed through the microphone, firm and proud. People once said, "Destroying the school is dangerous." But now we understand that destruction isn't always about breaking walls or smashing windows. Destroying means removing what is rotten, what has been hurting us, and rebuilding something honest and strong. That's what we did. Applause exploded through the air. Students, parents, and even former students who had returned to witness this day. Celine looked out at them and saw a new beginning forming right in front of her. This was not a legacy of money or power. It was a legacy of justice. For her, the day Liana fell was the day the old order collapsed. When the ceremony ended, a reporter pushed through the crowd and asked, "Ms. Ward, do you think this model will be used in other schools?" Celine smiled faintly, her expression both tired and hopeful. "This is only the beginning," she said. "If a change can happen here in Briarwood, then it can happen anywhere." The cameras flashed. The microphones crowded around her face. The story of Briarwood was coming to a close, but another chapter was already waiting to be written in schools across the state, where justice still needed to find a voice. 6 months later, the world looked different. The Liana Initiative, born from tragedy, had spread far beyond one small town. Newspapers across the state printed headlines like, "Briarwood's new model for school safety, a tragedy turned into reform." People everywhere were talking about what had happened. It was something the state had never seen before, a system built from trauma, but designed to protect everyone, no matter their background. That morning, hundreds of parents, students, and government officials filled the great hall of the state capitol. TV cameras stood ready, lights flashing brightly. On the stage above them, huge white letters stretched across a blue banner. "The future of school safety, the Liana Initiative." The music faded, and the audience grew quiet. The doors opened, and Celine Ward stepped onto the stage. She wore a simple gray suit. Her posture was straight, and though her face looked calm, her eyes held the kind of strength that comes from surviving battles most people could never imagine. She was no longer just Liana's mother, or the woman who fought back after injustice. She was now a state school safety advisor, responsible for protecting thousands of children. Celine stepped up to the podium. Her voice filled the room, strong, steady, and confident. "Today," she said, "I am proud to announce that 3 schools outside Briarwood will now follow the full 12-point safety standard of the Liana Initiative. This isn't a special program or a privilege. This is a right, something every student deserves." Behind her, the names appeared on the giant screen: Riverside High, Oakwood Academy, and Northgate Prep. The hall erupted with cheers. Parents cried and hugged. Teachers clapped. Some students raised their phones to record the historic moment. Liana sat in the front row. She looked radiant and healthy, holding her mother's hand tightly. When the host called her name, she rose slowly and walked onto the stage. The same girl who had once been lying unconscious in a hospital bed now stood in front of hundreds of people. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger. "I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through," she said softly. "If the Liana Initiative can help even one person I've never met, then everything that happened will be worth it." Tears filled many eyes. The audience broke into thunderous applause that lasted nearly a minute. But then, a man stood up from the officials' bench. He was tall, gray-haired, and serious. It was Mr. Martin Greaves, a leading member of the conservative group in the Ministry of Education. He took the microphone and said, in a slow, heavy voice. The idea sounds beautiful, but what about reality? Cameras, hotlines, and independent oversight boards cost money, hundreds of thousands of dollars for every school. This state can't print money out of thin air. This is a dream, not a real policy. The room fell into uneasy whispers. Some people looked down, others frowned. The camera crews turned toward Celine again, waiting for her to respond. But she didn't speak right away. She looked instead at the rows of students sitting in the audience. After a moment, a 10th grade girl from Riverside High stood up. Her voice shook, but she refused to sit down. "I was beaten in the locker room," she said. "When I told my teacher," she said, "don't make a big deal out of it." If the Liana Initiative had existed back then, I wouldn't have had to stay silent. The entire hall went still. The girl looked toward Liana with tears streaming down her cheeks. "We need this. We need the protection you didn't have." Then another voice spoke. A boy from Northgate Prep stood up, fists clenched. "I was threatened because of my skin color," he said. "If there had been cameras, or a hotline, or someone willing to listen, maybe it wouldn't have happened." The silence that followed was heavy, but only for a moment. Then applause burst through the room, louder and louder until the walls seemed to shake. Mr. Greaves froze, unable to say anything more. The microphone slipped from his hand and clattered on the table. Celine walked over to the boy, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, and spoke so that everyone could hear. "A seed has been planted, and its roots are spreading across this land. No one can erase memories, and no one can stop the younger generation from demanding justice." Everyone stood up, clapping and cheering. Reporters captured every second. Within minutes, the hashtag #ProtectOurKids was trending across social media. The ceremony ended with joy and celebration. But before Celine could even take a breath, her phone started to buzz loudly. The name Camila Frost flashed on the screen. Celine stepped aside and answered. Camila's voice came through, quick and worried. "Celine, Richard Kellen has filed a lawsuit. The Kellen Foundation is trying to overturn the defamation ruling. They want to clear their name in court." Celine's eyes darkened. She gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her expression hardened like steel. "The battle isn't over," she said. Looking back toward the crowd of cheering students, she whispered to herself, "If they want to fight in court, then I'll bring the truth there." And so began the next chapter, the Kellen Foundation's counter-lawsuit. 2 years later, Briarwood High looked completely different. The A-block hallway, once the site of a terrible tragedy, now gleamed with fresh white tiles. Along the walls were framed photos of students who had joined the #ProtectLiana movement. In the center of the hall hung a metal plaque that read, "The day Liana fell was the day justice stood up." Every week, students placed flowers and letters under it. What had once been a scar was now a place of learning and remembrance. Liana Reyes, now a confident senior about to graduate, walked down the hall with her friends, Nina, Deshawn, and Ivy, the same people who had supported her since the beginning. Together, they now led the school's media club. Liana stopped in front of the plaque and turned to face a group of new 9th graders. Her voice was calm but filled with purpose. "Here 2 years ago I fell," she said. "Not because I was weak, but because the system failed to protect me. But from that fall came change. I tell you this not to frighten you, but to remind you, every one of you has the right to be safe, to be heard, and to never stay silent." The hall went quiet. Then, a small boy at the back raised his hand. His voice trembled as he said, "I was bullied at my old school. I was too scared to tell anyone because I thought they'd hurt me more. But when you spoke just now, I felt like I could finally trust someone." Tears rolled down his cheeks. Some students glanced at each other with sympathy and guilt. Liana walked up to him, knelt so they were face to face, and gently hugged him. "You don't have to be silent anymore," she said softly. "At Briarwood, you're protected, not just by the rules, but by all of us." The crowd erupted in applause. Then, without anyone leading them, the new students began to chant together, "Protect each other. Protect each other." The words spread like a wave through the hallway. At the far end, Celine Ward stood quietly, watching. She didn't step forward or say anything. She simply smiled, her eyes wet with tears. In a whisper meant only for herself, she said, "We didn't just save a school. We saved the future." The media club's camera zoomed in on the memorial plaque, then slowly panned out, showing the hallway full of light, laughter, and new hope. The day Liana fell was the day the old order ended, and a new generation rose. Outside, the camera lifted toward the bright blue sky. Across the state, white flags bearing the words Liana Initiative fluttered in the wind. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more kind and powerful stories. Watch our next video for another unforgettable journey. And share this story with someone who needs it today.